On Sunday Night Football, we will see the LA Chargers taking on the Miami Dolphins in a game that truly could make or break the Chargers season. A win this week gets them in the range where they're around, 30% chance of making the playoffs. But a loss, statistically, could nearly drop them completely out of playoff chances. So, like we do every single week, let's go through some of the keys to this week's game and what the Chargers need to do to win this game and succeed. So, if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe, but let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go and get right into things. As mentioned, the Chargers will be playing the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. This was flexed just a couple weeks back to be Sunday Night Football. Originally was not, and the build-up to this point has only grown more dramatically with a lot of drama pertaining to, social media quarterbacks. And, just the fact that the Chargers are on the break of not being able to make the playoffs in general. So, lots to talk about in this video. And Chargers enter this game at 6-6. The Miami Dolphins sit at 8-4 currently in the wild card, while the Chargers at the 9th seed. And with playoff hopes dwindling for the Chargers, they will need some luck for a couple teams to lose certain games and allow them to re-enter the playoffs. If you would like to know who you should be rooting for this week, feel free. I uploaded a video on that just a few days ago. Go check that out after this video. But the Chargers do need some luck. But the most important thing is for the Chargers to win, especially with their playoff hopes shrinking dramatically. With the season coming so close to the end, each game matters that much more. And a win this week not only could keep you in the hunt for the playoffs, but allow you to enter into the playoffs again with a wild card spot, and could also build a lot of momentum and get a lot of better energy within the locker room for the Chargers. So let's talk about the kind of first key point to this week's game, and that's going to be Justin Herbert versus Tua Tagovailoa. Now, these guys were picked within the same draft just a few years back, with the 5th overall pick by the Dolphins for Tua and the 6th for the Chargers for Justin Herbert. And since then, there's been a lot of competition. People, when you bring up one name, like to immediately bring up the other name. And this, I believe, will be the first time that these two will face each other long term. Unless they face each other in the rookie year, but at the same time, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick might have started that, so I'm not even 100% sure. But Herbert and Tua are both great quarterbacks. You have to give it to them. If you disagree with either of those statements, maybe take a look at the stats. But both these guys are great quarterbacks, to say the least. And they are both very humble, very respectable. They keep to themselves, and they perform when they're out on the field. Now, the rosters around these guys maybe have built differently, to say the least. But these guys have both been able to perform at a high level. Tua took a massive leap this past year, bringing in Tyreek Hill and also having a guy in Jalen Waddle, while the Chargers have focused primarily on building the defense and the offensive line. And sadly, Herbert hasn't had the same luck in wide receivers so far, especially with the fact that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have not been able to play many games together, let alone by themselves in general. I feel like I've never seen those two out in the field that much through most of the year. But both have had very good years so far. I mean, Tua is currently an MVP candidate. Justin Herbert was expected to be, currently is not, but isn't too far out if they get on a roll here, get a good record, and Herbert can start turning up things around. He could quite potentially become a candidate once again. But so let's take a look at some of the stats. Herbert sits at 4th in passing yards, while Tua is at 13th. Now, we got to take this with a grain of salt. Tua has missed quite a few games here. It's likely that he would jump in the top 10, somewhere in probably the 7-8 range if you were to have played those games. So both, high-level quarterbacks. You also see Tua with the 8th most touchdowns Herbert with the 8th most touchdowns and Tua with the 6th most. So even though Tua's played a few less games, he is able to score a little bit more. And no matter who you want to blame that on, that doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Based on the stats, Tua is slightly better in scoring the ball. Now, the two have had a great year, which likely means that this game will be a fight for which offense can do better, especially with the Chargers defense looking quite beat up, and the Dolphins defense, although being very solid, is, a little bit hit or miss, it feels like at times. So this will likely be a very offensive-heavy game. And, currently Dolphins have the 21st ranked pass defense, while the Chargers have the 17th. So neither of these guys are top-level passing defenses. Neither of them are. Actually, both are below average at 16 being average. So, I don't think either of his quarterbacks are going to be held back massively by the defense. They'll likely be able to, maybe get a little bit more easier throws than they're normally used to seeing. The key in this situation right here is the fact that I don't think you're going to slow down Tua, and we're going to talk about why in a second here. And Herbert, I think, is going to get his own. So the key in this situation is to hopefully limit the aspects that are controllable and just be prepared for the big plays that are bound to happen between these two incredible quarterbacks. Not much you can truly control in this situation. Yeah, get some pressure on both these quarterbacks and, contest some passes, but with such high-level quarterbacks, they're going to make passes that you don't think is possible. So, the next topic here is going to be the killer wide receiver duo that the Miami Dolphins have. As I mentioned, the Dolphins brought in Tyreek Hill this past year when they already had Jalen Waddle, and the Dolphins' offense has looked great all year, primarily because of these two guys. It might be one of, if not the best wide receiver duo in the entire league, and that's not just the eyesight test looking at them on the field, but also statistically. If you look at this statistically, not only do the two carry immense speed, all over the field, but they also have very, very good route running as well as an ability to catch the ball pretty much at any point, but especially at a high point. If you want to talk about statistics, the two are both top 5 in receiving yards. Sorry about that. And Tyreek Hill is number 1. Very, very good to see. And they combined for 11 total touchdowns on the year, both sitting somewhere around 20 range of touchdowns for themselves. Very, very solid numbers, especially for the fact that these two wide receivers are on the same team. Now, the pair also does a great job at after the catch with, I think Waddle had 300 some yards and Hill having 400 yards. And the Chargers, struggle against that already. They fail to tackle sometimes on easy tackles, as well as the fact that they just blow coverages where the receiver can catch it and just have a free run the rest of the way to the end zone. So the likelihood of more yards after the catch to occur this game, I feel like, is pretty high. Now, Derwin James is doubtful. J.C. Jackson is still out, obviously, from his previous knee injury, and we also see Bryce Callahan, who has been a shining piece to this defense, is also listed as doubtful, which only leaves Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. as your primary DBs that are going to be covering these guys. The rest of these people that would be covering are people that don't commonly see the field. And what that means is the speed from Waddle and from Tyreek Hill will likely be one of the major factors in this game. Yes, they're going to be able to get some early plays from their route running and from their catching, but as the game progresses, with Asante Samuel Jr. and Michael Davis being the primary people that are guarding these guys, they're going to get worn out and they're going to get tired from constantly chasing these guys down, which means that later in the game, second half, fourth quarter, whatever it may be, there likely will be some bigger plays that occur just because Asante Samuel Jr. or Michael Davis won't be able to keep up long term because they're going to get tired. So, what is the key to success for this Chargers team? Well, firstly, try your best to contain Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But the factor is, there's going to be a couple big plays to both these guys, no matter what you do. So what should you do? Well, first off, get pressure on Tua. And although Joey Bosa is still out, Khalil Mack can get decent amount of pressure. Sebastian Joseph Day will be out, which is, a big hit on the run defense, but also in the pass defense. He does a very good job. You got to find a way to get some pressure on Tua, which is going to limit the amount of, long play opportunities because he's going to be forced to get the ball a little bit quicker. We saw this last week with Justin Herbert against the Raiders. He was forced to get the ball a little bit earlier, which led to limited long or large plays. But I think the biggest key factor is going to be leaning on that zone a little bit. When this team was built, it felt like it was a man defensive kind of team. J.C. Jackson, Bryce Callahan, even Derwin James were all great man coverage guys. Even Asante Samuel Jr. But as the years gone on, we've seen some of these players get injured, and now they're going against an incredible duo of the Dolphins wide receivers. You're going to be forced to use some zone to have coverage over top from the safeties to hopefully prevent those big 30-yard, 40-yard plays, but also so that you're not wearing out guys like Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. So you have them in the fourth quarter and they're not exhausted. You're going to have to use your zone, pass these guys through coverage, and know where they're at all times. Yeah, it's hard to know where two different guys that are both incredible are at all times, but you need to track them through these zones progressively, pass them off one-to-one. Even if you're double covering these guys through your zone, just make sure that they stay covered for as long as possible so that you can get pressure on Tua. That's the key to success here, is I think primarily focusing on zone over man and passing them off and making sure everyone is cognitively there. Now, the next thing is going to be about the fact that the Chargers' O-line has been butchered, has been torn apart as of late, not only from injuries but also allowing major sacks to the opposing team. The Chargers have already seen a ton of injuries from the whole team, but as of late, it's really, really hit the offensive line hard. Yes, early on we saw Rashawn Slater go down, but it seems, thankfully Corey Linsley will be returning this week, but in his absence last week, this offensive line looked horrible. Herbert had 0 time to throw the ball, which led to a lot of, rush plays, poor opportunities, a lot of sacks, and just drives that were killed because the O-line couldn't hold up. Now, thankfully, Corey Linsley will likely be returning, but Trey Pipkins is listed as doubtful. Actually, he might be out entirely, which means we're going to likely see Foster Sarell a lot more. Now, with plenty of backups already starting on the O-line at this current moment, finding time for Herbert is going to be a struggle. But that is something that needs to be focused on immensely because Herbert needs time to make these big time plays. And he can't do that if he only has 1 or 2 seconds of time. Now, thankfully, the Dolphins aren't great at getting sacks. They're pretty solid at getting pressure, but maybe not so much on getting sacks. They're 17th in the league currently for sacks, which, right there at averaging somewhere around 2 to 3 sacks per game. And, that's still at least a little bit better than we've seen recently for the Chargers. Now, honestly, my biggest worry is an ex-Charger. Last week, we saw Jerry Tillery get a ton of pressure early on and be very pivotal for the Raiders' win. And this week, we'll be seeing Melvin Ingram line up for the Dolphins, staring down his former team of the Chargers. And I think that could be enough of a reason for him to go and have a really good game. So with, Foster Sarell, once again, at your tackle position with Trey Pipkins out, and Jameer Sawyer struggling a little bit more than we saw earlier in the year, I think Melvin Ingram may have a really good game, and you got to try to focus on, limiting him. But they also have plenty of other solid edge rushers as well as interior rushers. So the key in this situation is giving Herbert time to throw the ball. Just more time. We don't need 5 seconds, although that would be incredible. Just a little bit more than 1 second. That's the key to success here. And I think Corey Linsley may be enough just to get you to do that because how smart he is by himself, but also how much better he is than pretty much every other center in the entire league. Now, the fourth point here will be the battle of two offenses that don't seem to have a running game going for either of them. The Chargers and the Dolphins are both bottom 5 offensive rushing teams. Austin Eckler can't seem to get many yards on the ground when he does run and barely gets any touches as it is. We also see the Dolphins not rely on their rush game that much, which means you have two offenses that are kind of a one-note offense. They're going to pass the ball, and it's just about slowing them down because they're going to find a way to get yards to the passing game no matter what. I mean, we've seen this for a long portion this year for both these teams. But I think the Dolphins might have a little bit easier of a job in the run game. Not only is their run offense slightly better than the Chargers at, I believe, 28th or 29th versus like 31st, but the Chargers have one of, if not the worst run defenses we've seen in a very, very long time. While the Dolphins are top 10 run defense. So the Dolphins likely will have a much easier time getting some yards on the ground, especially each carry. Currently, the Chargers allow 5.4 yards per carry, an absolutely insane number. The Chargers will have to find a way to limit those yards allowed on the ground, but also find a way to use their own rushing game with Joshua Kelly, who's looked very solid, as well as Austin Eckler out there, and try to make it not so easy and so simple to guess what the Chargers offense is going to be doing. So, not much to say there. I don't think either of these offenses are going to have a great game on the ground. If anything, the Dolphins will more likely than the Chargers would. But you got to find a way for both teams to implement a little bit of that run game to just force some people to move around a little bit. Hopefully the Chargers can be the team that does that, forces people to load the box a little bit more, which will allow some more openness downfield that Herbert can use to get some bigger plays. The last topic here, before we talk about some of these predictions, is the Chargers have to be better offensively. The defense is missing Sebastian Joseph-Day. They're still missing Joey Bosa, although when he got injured a while back, it seemed like he could have been returning around this time. He is still out. J.C. Jackson is obviously still out for the season. Derwin James is doubtful. Bryce Callahan is doubtful. With a massively beat up defense, the offense is going to have to shoulder a lot of the weight from this game and take hold to hopefully win this game. For weeks, we've seen Joe Lombardi fail this offense and call poor play after poor play, while us fans have been calling for his head, for his job. He still has a job. This week is the week that this offense has to get rolling. Whether that is Joe Lombardi finally figuring out what he's doing and calling some good plays, or Justin Herbert, I don't care, but this offense needs to figure it out. Last week, the only offensive scoring touchdown was an off-script play between Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert, when Herbert was forced out of the pocket and Keenan Allen decided to alter his route and go to the end zone, and he would catch a huge touchdown to keep the Chargers in the game. Completely off script. The Chargers need to find a way to score this ball. So score some touchdowns. Because the defense, I don't think is going to be able to limit the amount of scoring that the Dolphins are going to have. Not only because how good the Dolphins are, but also because how many injuries they currently are looking at. Herbert needs to be smart with the ball. Prevent sacks, obviously, but don't force things. You can't have strip sacks. You can't be throwing, tough balls that are going to be either, like a really, really bad pass on like a long situation on like second or long. Take the short one if you can, make it a little bit easier, and you can't be throwing interceptions. Joe Lombardi can't be calling constant screenplays. He can't be calling constant dig routes. It's not going to do anything. A lot of things need to work out. But if Herbert can rely on his playmakers, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, even Joshua Palmer as of late, and be the player that we all know Justin Herbert is, because he can make plays like anyone else. If he can do that, I think this offense can get things rolling. So, my predictions for this game, I think both offenses are going to be buzzing, and I truly think that this might turn into a shootout. I think this game could go both ways. I think Dolphins or the Chargers could win it, but I think that there's not going to be many points left out on the field. There will be a ton of touchdowns scored, I believe. Truly, I think Herbert is going to find a way to do it himself, whether Joe Lombardi has a good calling game or not. And I think the Dolphins are going to score against this beat-up Chargers defense. Herbert and Tua will light a fire underneath the media, who has been clamoring for a reason to fight about which one of these two is better. And I think they're both going to have a great game, which is going to lead to further reason for the media to be talking about them. And I think both defenses, although they're not going to do great, will force a turnover or two. I think it's going to work. Whether that's a fumble or interception, I think there will be some turnovers in this game. But lastly, like I said, I think this game could go either way. I think this game could turn to a huge shootout. But at the very least, I think there'll be at least 20 to 30 points from both teams. So my prediction will be a Chargers victory. And I was really hesitant on saying this. And I think the main reason why I'm saying a Chargers victory here is because they need it. They need this victory. I'm not going to be surprised if they lose this, which is sad to say, but they have to get this victory. So my prediction is a Chargers victory 31-28. A really, really close game, and I think it's going to come down to the last possession of the game. But what are your guys' thoughts? Who do you think will win this game? Who will have a better game between Justin Herbert and Tua? And, what do you think the chances of the Chargers making the playoffs are at this very moment? And how much better do you think it will be after this game occurs? If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And as always, I hope it taught something today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Something really important to me. Affects most of the day in a great way, because every single day can be a great day if you all just put in the effort. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.